Welcome to Altered Moments. I'm Kimberly Stevens, your host, and I'm already crying about this episode. I am so excited about our guest today, Carol Lambert Bobo. She is an amazing Hall of Fame swim coach from Hinsdale Central High School, my high school, and we have an amazing story to tell you today that we share an altered moment. Before we talk about our altered moment, I wanted to just take a moment and talk about what an altered moment actually is. And an altered moment is simply a play on words between the word A-L-T-E-R, altar, and A-L-T-A-R, the altar of God. And when the altar of God alters or changes our lives, we are never the same. And with God, all things are possible. Well, I'm going to bring Carol Lambert Bobo to the stage. Carol, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here today. This is such a crazy story, and it is a life-altering moment for both of us.
Definitely.
And I can't believe here we are all these years later talking about it. And I can't believe how much it changed my life and changed the trajectory of my life for good. First, I want to talk a little bit about you and your coaching. And when you were my high school coach, you were a brand new coach.
Very much so.
And we were actually talking a few minutes ago about how when this altered moment happened when I was a senior, that you were 27 years old and you'd been coaching for about 5 years. But I want to back up a couple years before my senior year, which is really when you changed my life the most. And you may or may not remember this, but my freshman year as a swimmer, I was not always the most faithful to show up for practice. I was telling my parents it was only for varsity and going home early. And I remember that was very frustrating for you as my coach. And you went to my parents for my sophomore year and you said, I want her at practice and I am going to pick her up every morning at 5 a.m. And you did not take no for an answer. You showed up at my house every single morning at 5 a.m. and drove me to practice to make sure that I would show up. And that is above and beyond what any coach would be expected to do. But you did that for me. And in doing so, you changed my life because you turned me into a real swimmer.
Oh, geez. I'm just thankful that I was there. I had, when I started coaching in 1978, I had a good relationship with the age group coaches at Hinsdale South, which is where you had started swimming.
Right.
And I had been the age group coach at Hinsdale Swim Club for a year and then came into the high school setting. So I had that camaraderie. I had that relationship. And Buff Toneman kept saying to me, Carol, Kim Stevens, the Ostendorp girls, just many other young ladies that were coming through the Hornet program. And I had learned from day one in my whole life of growing up, you don't choose somebody who's closer to you because they were part of your life for 10 years versus someone that you're just meeting. It's how do you incorporate everybody and how do you make this work? And I happened to live very close to you at the time. And it It was easy for me. And back then, I could pick you up. Whereas nowadays, in a school setting, I wouldn't be able to do that. I wouldn't be able to have driven you home or picked you up in the morning, because you just didn't want to put yourself in that particular position.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yes.
Thank goodness that things were a little different then, because
Absolutely.
had you not made that effort, I would not be a swimmer, or I would not have been a swimmer. And without swimming, my life would have been completely different.
Yeah.
Probably wouldn't be here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's when I quit coaching and teaching and went into the guidance office, that was one of the things that I tried to get young ladies and young men to understand. You may be involved in this sport right now, but how are you going to continue to take it forward? Because you may not be that recruited athlete, but you very well can be that intramural person, or you can find other ways to get involved. Don't give up on something that was so meaningful to you for so many years. And that's what life is all about.
Absolutely. And my motto is never give up.
Mm-hmm.
And never give up initially, and first and foremost, I learned from you.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate that.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciate
Thank you for making that effort way back when for me. So fast forward 2 years now to my senior year, and you were coaching about 5 years. You'd been my coach. That was my third year, my fourth year that you were my coach.
Mm-hmm.
And you had already won, I think my sophomore year, we won state. And you had at least 1 or 2 state championships under your belt. I think 2.
I think it was 2, yes. Yeah.
And so my senior year, we were slated as a team to win state again. And I was seated first in the 50 and the 100 freestyle. And a lot of that state championship was riding on me doing my job in the 50 free and the 100 free. And you know the story. I know the story. For the sake of everyone who's listening, I stood up on the blocks for the 50 free as a senior, and I had college coaches in the stands waiting to see how I would swim, and hopefully to offer me a scholarship soon after that. And again, our team was slated to win the state championship. So there was a lot riding on that 50 free. And I stood behind the blocks. The starter blew the whistle. I stepped up on the blocks. And he said, "Take your mark." And I dove before the gun went off. And we got called back to the blocks, false start. In those days, you could false start 1 time, and it was charged to the heat. And so I got a second chance, got back out of the pool, stood behind the blocks, starter blew the whistle. I stepped up, "Take your mark," and I dove again. DQ'd. And I came up from the double gun. I knew it was me. And I swam to the wall. And I was already bawling by the time I got to the wall. And I felt so much shame. And I did not know what to do. Carol, I wanted to run out of the pool in my swimsuit wet. And I just ran into the locker room and I started sobbing. And this is where you come in. You brought me a towel.
Mm-hmm.
And do you remember?
Gave you a big hug. Gave you a big hug, and I just said, it was one of those things where, as an adult, you could either be shameful. I could be shameful, or I could be encouraging. And I always tried to do my best to be the encourager. I know that my voice rose and I know that there was frustration, but on the other hand, I also knew, and this is what I always say to the TV, no team is dependent upon one person. Every team is dependent upon every person. And it's not one play, it's how the whole team starts and finishes. And it was one of those things where I was just like, I said to you, cry it out for a moment or two, that I need you back in there. And so does your team. And basically, don't you dare leave here, because I will come and find you, and I gave you some space, but I had a couple of the girls check in on you just to make sure that you were still where I last saw you. And the beauty of the 50 freestyle is that there's a break, because then it goes on to diving.
Yeah.
So we had that time to just kind of regroup, pull things back together. Susie Kerbari was a senior with you. She was our top diver.
Yeah.
She was going head to head with the girl from New Trier. Anything and everything I asked of every single person that Friday in prelims and then Saturday in finals, you all did with the utmost respect and care for each other, as well as for the coaches, your families, any and all of those things. And, I'm watching the Olympic trials last night, and my heart just drops for Lydia Jacoby, missing going back to the Olympics by 2 or 3/100ths of a second.
I know.
And it's sad. And I felt so bad for her. And then you have these commentators are like, oh, well, the Olympic champion is not able to go back and try to repeat. And it's like we put so much onto our individuals, our athletes, our people, our caring people, our supportive people, when in reality, we're not always doing the right thing for them, and not to say that when I walked away from you, it wasn't like, but that's not going to help you any. Absolutely not, and it's not going to help any going back to the team. And I'm sure, even though that was 1982, but even going forward, there were a few other moments when sometimes the frustration got ahead of me, and I would have to just kind of clamp my mouth shut and go, take a breath, time out, give it up to higher being, and then go back. And it's always better to ask for forgiveness, and you move forward from there.
What you said to me, I wish I had written down your words, because they were life-changing. That moment when I was in the locker room crying and you were telling me not to give up was a defining moment in my life. Because had I given up, had you let me give up, I would not have understood or known going forward in my life, when the hard things came, that I could go on and I could step back up on the blocks. And again, two things that I owe my entire life to you over. One is picking me up every single day and making me show up to practice. And the second was picking me up after my greatest failure to date in my life and making me get back up on the blocks. Ultimately, it was my choice, but had you not been there to support me, I would not have gotten back up on the blocks. And, we had the break, we had diving. You said your words to me. You had my teammates check in on me. And ultimately, I did decide to honor you and your words and our team. And I stepped up on the blocks for the 100 free. And I didn't win. I got second.
Okay.
But that second is one of the greatest victories of my life because I came back from one of the greatest defeats of my life within a matter of minutes. And I owe that to you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
yeah.
And as you know, the college coaches still ended up recruiting me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did go on to Iowa and set Big Ten records and became an All-American and a Hall of Fame swimmer. And it started that day when you started picking me up every single morning. And then it continued because you did not let me give up after that double full start.
And then you found it within yourself to keep pushing forward. And obviously, you still had your ups and downs, just like we all do, and that's life. But we've learned how, and you've learned how, I've learned how to continue to deal with things.
Yeah. And as you were talking about now in this day and age, as a coach, you probably wouldn't be able to pick me up in the mornings. I think a lot about how our culture that we don't necessarily encourage people to come out of the locker room and step back up for that next event. And I feel like that's a disservice that we're not allowing our kids to overcome adversity. We're not allowing our, culturally, we coddle. Oh, she just had the worst tragedy of her life. She's in the locker room. Leave her alone. We're not going to ask anything of her. And I could have stayed in that locker room and not known that I was capable of so much more.
I would agree with everything that you have just said. And I'm not quite sure what happened within our culture. I mean, there are still many, many families and many, many parents and many, many kids who do understand that. But we've tipped it almost to the other side where the excuses are permitted instead of the learning experience. And as one of my former bosses used to say when I was in guidance, put your boots on and strap them on up. You just got to jump right back in again. And if you don't learn how to handle that, how are you going to learn how to handle everything else that life, love, faith will be throwing at you throughout the years that you will be on this earth?
Absolutely. My college coach, Jim Richardson, said to me, I think it was my sophomore year in college, and I asked him why he still recruited me after the debacle. And he said, because it showed me that you could come back after adversity. And I've thought about that a lot because, as you know, in my life, there was a lot of adversity.
Yes.
Losing my son, spending 4 years in the hospital with my daughter until she had a liver transplant, and a very bad divorce and custody battle, and then breast cancer, and then losing my home because of my medical debt, and having to rebuild my life time and time and time again. And if I had not had that locker room moment of pain and overcome that by stepping back on the blocks in the 100 free when I was 17 years old, I'm not sure that I would have continued with my life after my son died and all of those things happened. And I like to talk about grit and gratitude. And today I want to just tell you how grateful I am to you for the gifts that you gave me. And the biggest gift you gave me was you taught me grit.
You're so welcome.
My 2 words, grit and gratitude. And Carol Lambert, Bobo, here you are, the teacher of those things, Hall of Fame swim coach, and amazing lady.
You're so kind. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a pleasure to have been in your life, to continue to be in your life. And to me, my relationships that I had developed not only as a swimmer myself, but also then through my coaching experience, just staying in touch with everybody. And, some of my best friends are the people I swam with,
Yeah.
So, I just, it's one of those blessings that when you do reach out and talk to someone, or you're speaking through text or email, it's like you just picked everything back up to where you were maybe 10 years ago, 4 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it happens to be. And you get that squeeze around your heart, you get the smile on your face, and it's just, it's thankful, it's gratitude, it's just enjoying. So.
I find that the swimming community in particular is one of my absolute happy and special places. Sometimes I think it's because we put in so much time together in the pool, and we worked so hard, and we were so tired, and we really needed each other to keep going.
True.
During those tough workouts, that I think it brought us extra close. And if we could rely on each other back then, when we were putting hours and hours and miles in the pool, of course we can still rely on one another. And many of my best friends still are swimmers from back in those days.
Right? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I have a strong connection with my Hinsdale Central, classmates. I had strong connection with probably, I'd say, about a fifth of all of my swimmers over the years. Having stayed in the same area,
Yeah.
I never really moved away. So, it's one of those things where I enjoy staying in touch and knowing where people are and what they're doing, and, where has life given you the lemons and what have you done with it, and I saw it with my older son, Scott. He swam for Hinsdale Central and then swam at Emory. And again, just his connections with all of his buddies, it continues on, whereas my younger son, Chris, was probably more natural of a swimmer, but he tended and gravitated toward the ball sports, but he's got a very strong connection with lots and lots and lots of people. So it's just, it's learning how to step back up And whether it's stepping back up on the blocks, whether it's picking yourself up and stepping up those 10 more steps, whether it's making the big move like you did from Rockford, Illinois to Florida.
Absolutely.
You know, one of my best friends growing up, she left Clarendon Hills, Hinsdale at the end of 8th grade and moved to Southern California.
Oh, wow.
You know, so she's been there for years, but I talk to her almost every day, you know, or we're texting or sending pictures. And it just, you're part of the lives. You're so interwoven. And no one's going to break that.
As a coach, I don't really know how to ask this question, but as a coach, I'm sure you had a lot of moments where you had to encourage somebody to do the next thing that was right for them, even though it was uncomfortable. And, you know, for mine, it was a huge, big step for me to come out of the locker room and step back up on the blocks. But I'm sure you dealt with it on a smaller level every day with all of the students or athletes that you coached.
Yes. And so much of it was, how do I say this? Everybody brings their own personalities into the environment. It's how do you attempt to shape it, to support it to the best of your ability? And then how can we learn to enjoy just being around each other? Because if you have a grumpy coach or a yelling coach, you probably are not going to perform as well. On the other hand, you don't want that coach to be your best friend. So there's got to be kind of that give and take, but also with boundaries. And, you know, there were a couple tough situations where I had to, as you started at the beginning, that you would say to your parents, oh, it's just for varsity and come home after school. I had to, during summer swimming, I actually had to call up a mom and just say, you know, where is your daughter? Well, she said, practice. She's with the swim club. I said, no, she's not. And she hasn't been here for 2 weeks.
Would that have been me?
No. And then there was somebody a few years later. And it was just, you either have to embrace it and make this something special for you, or if you're kind of just going along with it, then you never give it your full attention. And that's what life is all about. And it's, you may only end up being the person who made state meet their senior year, didn't score any points, but their goal was to make it to state meet. And you know what? They did it. And I'm so proud of you. Or, you know, you were the person, not you, but others were JV, varsity, or JV, varsity, or, you know, enjoyed it so much that they ended up going back and teaching. You know, and I tried to do that in the classroom as well, you know, to get to know each student on a level, to get an understanding of where they're coming from, you know, what's going on. Yes.
Get to that next place that was appropriate for them.
Yes. You know, and, you know, and I had my few moments, you know, with parents like, why are you doing that? Why are you putting in our back-to-back events? You know, and it's like, well, this is what the team needs.
Yeah.
You know, we will do anything and everything to make sure that, you know, she swims these other events. So we've got some time so that if she is being recruited, they can actually, you know, coaches can see that. And coaches want to see versatility, grit, determination, leadership. How well do you work with others? the one thing that I really enjoyed it when college coaches would reach out to me and talk to me about and ask me, how has what has this person brought to your team? Because that's the recruitable athlete, not the person who has the best times, but how are they going to work with everybody else? And I laugh right now because there's a master swimmer who was part of one of my first groups when I came back. All she ever wanted to do was the 50 free, maybe do 100. Well, she's now in the top 10 for every single event, freestyle in US Masters. And I just look at her and go, tried to get you to swim the 500. I know, but I just didn't want to do it. So it's just.
Is that Janet?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And I mean, but again, the camaraderie is there. We can laugh about it. I can tease her about it. And she'll look at me and she'll go, yeah, you were right. But you can't push somebody to something that you want them to do if they're not going to come along with you, because then it's going to be a failed attempt.
Yeah. And that's what makes you a really good coach.
Oh, well, thanks.
Yeah. How many state championships? 6?
6.
And how many state champions do you even know?
Oh, not off the top of my head.
A lot.
I mean, I think I gotta stop and think here. I think the only event I didn't have a state champion in was the 200 IM.
Wow.
Otherwise,
that's amazing.
Yes. Otherwise, we had all 3 relays, 200 free, 50 free, diving, 100 fly, 100 free, 500 free, 100 back, 100 breast. And as I said, the 3 relays.
Wow.
Oh,
that's
I lost
you. Pretty amazing career.
Okay. Yeah. And, as I said, I look at people now and they'll say, well, do you remember so-and-so and so-and-so? And I go, okay, time out here. I'm having a senior moment. So give me years for context, please.
Yeah.
And then I'll go, oh, yeah, blah, 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 blah. You were friends with so on and so forth, or do you remember this swimmer or that swimmer?
Amazing.
So I was so ingrained with what was going on, and the fact that girls swimming in the state of Illinois, we started in August. So it always started the school year, which I loved, because you really were able to kind of get everybody off on the right foot for academics, for swimming, for where they were headed. How can you manage, all of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you miss most about coaching?
I miss connections.
Yeah.
I miss the connections. I actually cannot. I'm in the water 6 days a week. 3 of those days I'm swimming. The other 3 days I'm fluid running. But I cannot stand on a pool deck for very long anymore because of all the years of standing on concrete tile and in the classroom. And I'm having a knee replaced next month. The other one's coming in about 1 to 3 years.
Oh, no.
Tom Schweer, who I coached with for many years in the mid to late 80s and early 90s, he's had both of his knees replaced. So it's a given for lots of swim coaches. So,
yes.
But it's, as I said, it's the connections. And let me get in the water and let me talk to you. I don't want to talk to you on deck because I can't stand there for long. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. Through all the years of coaching, what do you think you would say to yourself now would you say anything to yourself as a young coach to encourage yourself?
I think one of the things, as I reflect back on those years, don't be afraid to ask for help, because back then I was handling the practices by myself. We just had Leif Erikson as the diving coach.
Yeah.
So that was very hard. I didn't realize it at the time. But I probably shortchanged a few people because I wasn't always attentive to everybody every moment. So that would be one thing. Don't be afraid to ask for help. To understand that there are people out there that think that they know what's better. And it's not that it's always better. It's just that maybe it's being said a different way, because we all learn differently.
Absolutely.
It's kind of learning those little quirks, and what's better for somebody else. I know that when I went into this is like in the mid 90s, I had a lot of just camaraderie help from one of the age group coaches, Mike Lorick, where I wasn't connecting, with one of the girls. So it's frustrating to me because she was also being very frustrating. She was being very frustrating to me, and I just couldn't quite figure out. So I would look at him and say, okay, we need to talk about this person. How can I approach? What can I do differently? So he a lot of times would speak to her, then, the three of us would sit down, and then it all kind of, went from there. And I think sometimes as a female coach, especially when women's sports started, I was a senior in high school when Title IX came through. So I had already kind of walked away from swimming and I was on the pom-pom squad because I was also a dancer. And it's just how my life was at that particular point in time. And I think we didn't necessarily have the support. A lot of women were thrown into the position who probably shouldn't have been, or without the extra little help. Now, I always had Don Watson in my corner, but he also had his own life going on. I could talk to him a little bit, not all the time. So you kind of you worked through it. You tried to figure it out. You did the best you could. So I think that was another thing. Don't be so hard on yourself. It's this is a growing process. And I think I wanted to be the best right from the very start when I didn't necessarily have all of the information, the knowledge, that type of thing. So I was always trying to ask some questions when I finally got comfortable in my own skin with it, and go from there.
You started off amazing. In the first 5 years, you had at least two.
Well, everybody, I was very, very blessed with all the young ladies that I had. You all were willing to work hard. You put in the time and the effort. I mean, when you think back on it, Mary Beth 1 year swam the 100 backstroke instead of swimming the 500 free. So Marianne, I moved her out of, put her in the 5 in her senior year. You don't always do the right thing, but you think that you are at that moment because you're looking at collectively what's the best for the group.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, I can speak as one of your swimmers who has been changed, altered, and I owe you everything in my life. And I can't thank you enough for showing up and making the effort to show up for me and our entire team You've changed lives.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you. And you are so welcome,
Thank
because
you.
those are special times for me. Very special.
Yeah, well, very special times for me as well, and many who are going to watch. We are just over our time. So, do you have any final thoughts?
There's so much running through my head right now. It just, as people, whether they view this, they read this, or they even think back on their own lives, make a difference. There's always an opportunity every day to make a difference. And it could be something that's just so minuscule, but it's so important to that other person or people. And I just, I'm a hugger. I'd like to embrace.
I love it. And you have made a difference. And if anyone is listening today and you know a coach like Carol in your life, send this podcast to them as a way to say thank you for the difference that they made. And in doing so, you just might make a difference in their life. Yeah.
Thank you, my dear.
Thank you. And with that, I will say thank you to everyone who tuned in and listened today, and who will listen on the playback. And we will be back with more Altered Moments very soon. Thank you to Carol Lambert Bobo, Hall of Fame coach from Hinsdale Central High School, and absolutely life-changing human being. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you.
Make a difference, everyone.